Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this extraordinary scrutiny panel meeting. Run through the safety procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls whilst the meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting is also recorded and will be subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? That's a no, so we'll move on. And there's no members of the public, so we'll move on to the next one. Okay, speaking under 20.1, we've had requests from Councillor Joanne Bright, who wants to speak under item 5, and Councillor Jill Bayford, who wants to speak under item 3. Public speaking, I've had a request from Miss Ruth Bailey, who wants to speak under item 6. Moving on to apologies, I've received apologies from Councillor Wing, who's substituted by Councillor Garner, Councillor Green, who's substituted by Councillor Will Scobie, and Miss Councillor Moore, who's replaced by Councillor Manners. Are there any more apologies? And that's a no. So are there any declarations of interest? That's a no. Okay, moving on to item 3. The retendering of the responsive repairs contract. I will call on Miss Sally O'Sullivan to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This report is regarding our proposed approach to the procurement of a partnering contractor for day-to-day responsive repairs, voids, compliance and major works. This is a service that is currently provided by MERS. The contract is due to expire on the 31st of March 2025. Due to the size and complexity of this contract, we must start the process now to ensure we give ourselves enough time to apply the right model and to procure the right partner to deliver this service. We have sought the assistance of a consultant to help us get this right. The consultant we have chosen has worked extensively with local authorities across Kent to procure the same kind of contract, meaning they have a wealth of experience to apply to this process. We have carried out a series of workshops where we discussed what's working well and what we want to improve with our current service, and have explored different options for our approach to service delivery with our new contract. We kept a strong focus on local delivery and the employment of local operatives. As part of this, we looked at the option to bring the entire service in-house, and this was discarded due to a number of operational issues that would hinder set-up and smooth service delivery. These included not having a depot available to work out of, store plant and materials, and would take a substantial investment and time to set up. Requirement for additional management for finance and ICT. The ability to cope with peaks and troughs of work through seasonal demand. And we would still have to procure contractors to carry out specialist works, for example, asbestos management and electrical safety. This is discussed more extensively in 3.12 of this report. We decided that the best proposal was to rework and improve the current model, which is a price per property and price per void. This means we have a fixed price agreement per property, which through our service provider will carry out repairs and maintenance using the national schedule of rates for anything that falls outside. The main benefits of this model include less administration than if we were to approve individual schedule of rates for all jobs and voids. Officers can focus on quality of works rather than value. We can have faster repair completion, as this model means that the contractor can complete works without seeking authorisation from TDC for a majority of orders. And this is a familiar way of working for TDC officers. The main disadvantage is that contractors may try and charge inappropriately for repairs they deem fall outside the price per property model, or carry out works in a property so that the value of final value falls outside the price cap. We will write elements into the contract to mitigate against these risks, and this including a clear document that sets out what repairs are included within the price per property and price per void, setting an appropriate cap to the price per property, clearly defining what happens when works go above the set cap. We are keen to extend the provision of some of our in-house services, and this would include minor works, fencing and arborist works. While we do this, we intend to keep these services available to call off through this contract as well, and this provides resilience to the service to our residents. We have sought to include an element into this procurement by introducing a requirement for a bid and delivery partner as a separate lot. This means we could have two partnering contractors, one for the main element for delivering repair and maintenance, and one to be a delivery partner for grant-funded works. We know that when grant funding becomes available, we have to be ready to bid for it and often deliver works within a very tight time frame, and we have included an estimated spend of £4 million per year for this element. But this will not be spent unless grant funding is available and our partner delivers a winning bid application. I have included this level of spending because we are ambitious and want the best for our assets and our residents. When grant funding becomes available, I want us to be in the best position to be awarded funding and deliver on what we said we would do. We have engaged our residents in the formation of this proposal, and as they have valuable first-hand experience of this service. Our residents gave some beneficial feedback and endorsed the model proposed. We continue to engage our residents in this process by asking them to assist us with the analysis of tenders that we receive. Thank you. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Sally. Councillor Whitehead, do you want to speak as Cabinet Member?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, everyone. My voice isn't great at the moment. It sounds really squeaky. The level of work that goes into both procurement and organisation of a housing service of this scale is extraordinary, as is the progress that has been made within housing since we brought it back in-house. I am, on occasion, criticised for being too ambitious in relation to housing. My confidence and belief in our new acquisition strategy and my willingness to invest in order to produce social and affordable housing at a far greater rate than ever before is one area where some members believe I may be too willing to invest. I obviously disagree, but my ambition is informed by knowledge and an understanding of both procurement and risk, and I will never approve a strategy or approach that I think could endanger either housing or our ability to deliver services. I am measured where I need to be, specifically to support greater ambitions for this portfolio and our ability as a council overall. This contract was last extended in 2020. It cannot be extended further, which means that coming in this May as an administration gives little use an extended in-house service across all areas. Much as evidenced by my determination to bring housing back and produce in-house temporary housing and our first in-house rough sleeping accommodation, my general inclination is to create and promote in-house services wherever possible. Ideals, much as my brain dislikes it, have to be considered in relation to realities, and the security of service, especially when what is at stake is the quality of delivered service to a very large number of our residents. And as such, focusing on areas that we can deliver in-house, such as minor works, and ensuring that our complex and specialist areas function and deliver without interruption is essential. As referenced in the report, we are now choosing to focus heavily on the local economy in housing procurement. Our contracts prioritise local jobs, local call centres, and include the requirement for local apprenticeships to build not only the local economy, but also build skills and employment opportunities. This, combined with our proposed in-house expansion of minor works to explore our delivery of direct services, allows us to deliver not only many highly complex work streams, but also build our own resilience. And the sheer scale of the number of new strategies being implemented and the considerable growth of our portfolio means that ensuring reliability of provision at a time when we are still a council with disproportionately low staffing for the scale of what we deliver means that considering the long-term future of all projects is essential, and testing the water in terms of in-house provision is a vital part of this. I know the level of work that has gone into the preparation of this procurement exercise, and I recognise just how hard Mrs. Sullivan and the team have worked. I welcome any discussion and any questions, and I am open, as always, to any suggestions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Call on Jill Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask, thank you, Sally, for the report. I'd just like to ask, what is the process and criteria for deciding to continue the contract beyond the 10 years? Thank you.
Thank you. So the thought behind that is this is a really large task, and it takes a lot of work to get through this kind of procurement. It's very large, it's very complex. So the time and effort that goes into it needs to be kind of have the reward come out the other side. The other part of this is that this is a partnering contract, and partnering and alliance is the key to delivering the good service here. With this kind of contract, with a repairs and maintenance contract particularly, a long-term contract is more desirable and favourable by the contractors that would bid for that, and it gives us that opportunity to build that service together in true partnership and form that alliance to give the best service that we can.
Thank you. So under what circumstances would you not continue?
If we had a difficult partnership, if the service provision was not as we expected, and we were unable to turn that around, that would be a reason to not continue for the further 5 years. Also, if we did explore further to bring the service in-house, and that was a model that we wanted to go ahead with, then of course there would be no reason to extend that beyond the 10 years as well.
Okay, members, hands up. Councillor Austin was first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sally. I've got two questions. The first one is under item 3.7, where you've got the thing about adding retrofit for decarbonisation into the contract. Could you just unpack that bullet point a little bit? Is it about somebody who can provide bid writing specifically about decarbonisation? Is it about somebody who can provide the physical works for decarbonisation and the bid writing, or could those all be separated out? I'm not quite clear about that one. And then the other one was about how does the model that you're using, the per property model, work in relation to the work with the other council departments? How do you decide that kind of aspect of the work? I see there are allocations for other council departments, but I'm not quite clear how that would work in relation to the per property stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I address your first question, Councillor Austin, so in regard to the retrofit for decarbonisation, we are looking for a bid and delivery partner that could write the bid for us. They would model our data, write the bid for us, and if they were successful with that bid on our behalf, they would then go on to deliver the work. So it's a full package, and the reason we have done it that way is actually because, as we have found out with the social housing decarb funding that we did recently for the tower blocks, we were awarded the funding, and then we have 2 years to deliver the amount of work. To spend 9 months procuring someone that can deliver the work really puts in jeopardy the ability to be able to spend. So that's the reason we've done that. A further thought to this was that I'd probably quite like to extend that to be able to bid for any kind of grant funding that came up and not keep it narrowed down specifically to decarbonisation works. I thought that might be of benefit to us if we don't know what's going to come up in the future. The second point, and in regards to the other council departments, there is provision in there for them to call off on this contract, and that is entirely what it is. It's an ability to call off for works that they require, and this would be using the schedule of rates. The price per property is only for the social housing stock. Yeah.
Councillor Patman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. The first one is about when our supply chains or contractors get it wrong. TDC feel the full whack of that, as in we get the complaint, we get the blame, etc., etc. Is there an opportunity in these contracts or re-tenders to kind of have them more accountable for their mistakes or for their errors? So that's my first question. The second question is, they also access a lot of our residents' homes that we don't have access to or we will never ever engage with. Is there a referral pathway for these supply chains or contractors to raise safeguardings or concerns when they enter the properties? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so your first question, when they get it wrong, when they make mistakes, that of course does happen. We have the ability through our contract to performance manage our contractor, and they are held accountable for that. In some cases, they will be required to take the full responsibility for the mistake they have made and respond to a complaint, or to provide compensation where that is appropriate. And like I've said, if there is a continuation of poor performance, we will monitor that through the contract. And if it does go horribly wrong, we can terminate. We do have break clause that means we can terminate for poor performance after a period of monitoring and giving them the opportunity to perform better. And the second question is regarding contractors' ability to raise safeguarding concerns. Yes, absolutely. I feel like this is achieved through a true partnership, as we'll be working together to serve our residents ultimately. Contractors will always have the ability to speak to us to raise a concern, but they also have access to the council's safeguarding, to be able to raise a safeguarding concern through the website if they feel that is more appropriate.
Thank you.
Councillor Manners.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Chair. I'm a little bit concerned that we seem to be, well, there's three questions really here. One is regarding value for money, one is regarding timing, and the other is on whether alternatives to this have been properly examined or whether we're being corralled into this because of the time restraints. On the value for money, I'm seeing a headline figure of 11 million a year over 3,400 properties. These are all residential properties, are they? Okay, so that gives us about 3,200, just over 3,200 per property per year. I do have some experience of the private sector in my previous earlier career, and I'm a landlord with 15 or 16 houses and apartments. And when I look at the typical costings for annual maintenance, including leasehold service charges and so on leasehold properties, it's nearer £1,600–1,700 a year in the private sector. So I just wondered how we have a figure that's almost, well, close on double that. That's the first part. So should we go through the whole lot? Secondly, on the timing of this, it does seem that we're being, as Helen Whitehead has said, that we're up against the clock on this one, in which case have options been looked at to roll this contract over for a further year? If it's all set up for a long-term contract, then I would imagine that having it roll over for a further year whilst we properly examined all other options would be plausible, if not desirable, in fact. So that's the second question. And thirdly, looking at alternative business models for managing this portfolio. I mean, it is a huge portfolio by any standards, but it's not unusual. There are quite a few operators in the UK who are managing, in the private sector, managing substantially larger portfolios than this. And it is possible to, when I look at the objections that have been given for wanting to have this with one contractor, rather than bringing this more in-house, they're basically all the functions that a day-to-day portfolio manager would have. When you slice it down, in the private sector, you would expect around about 100 to 120 units to be under one property manager, with a range of property inspectors and a pre-approved stable of trusted, vetted contractors to undertake the various roles, and then the professional service, the legal and the surveying services that can be brought in under contract. And I just wondered whether that had been properly examined, because the evidence in the private sector is that would deliver far better value, or ought to deliver far better value than we're seeing for the £3,200 a unit that's being proposed here. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a lot of questions. Right, on the first one in regards to value for money, 11 million per year is not realistically what we would spend through this contract. There is the ability to spend that if we need it. So already 4 million per year is put aside for the bid and delivery partner, and that will only be used if there is funding available and if they are successful with writing a bid through which the intention would be, it would be a minimum of 50% outlay for the HRA budget, because we would hope the 50% would be covered by grant funding. There is also provision in there for 2 million for capital works, and again this is on a call-off basis. We wouldn't necessarily spend £2 million per year on capital works, but if we did spend £2 million per capital works through this contract, it wouldn't be spent through another contract, and we would weigh that up as we go through to see which would provide us better value for money. I've put that provision in there because what we have experienced since taking the stock in-house is health and safety issues have come up quickly, and we have to respond to them quickly, and these are structural problems which are costly to repair. And therefore to have that provision through this contract to just be able to go, please go out and sort this out, kind of answers that for us. So there already is £6 million, which is added in, because it needs to be added into the contract and it needs to be figured through the budget, but it's not necessarily that we would spend that each year. So, and then there's the small provision there for the capital works, for the corporate side of things as well, which wouldn't be spent through our price per property model. So that kind of brings it down much more in line to the figures that you were talking about.
Could I come back on
Yes, please.
that?
Yes.
Two questions really. What do you mean by capital works? I mean, is that could you give an example of that within a specific property?
So currently we have a property out there which we've discovered recently has basically the windows are almost falling in, and for many years they've been held up with planks of wood, which this poses our immediate health and safety issue, and one that we want to address as quickly as possible. And those are the kind of works that I'm talking about. We have a price for that. That's going to cost about £144,000 because of the structural works that have to be carried out to make that property safe and to repair whatever has been happening with that. Okay.
Yeah, on that, I mean, that's the sort of thing that would be costed in on the 1,600 to 2,000 a year that I referred to in the private sector. You would expect that includes things. I mean, examples I've had is where entire walls, exterior walls, have had to be repointed. We've got one case where we had £10,000 where a marine wall was actually subsiding. We had to have a new wharf built, and the 100 and something leaseholders all got hit with quite an exceptional bill. So I had costed that into the numbers there. What is a bottom line figure then that you would expect to actually be spending under this contract?
I'm going to find that really difficult. Yeah, I'm going to find that really difficult to provide you off the top of my head. Can I come back to you on that? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. I don't want to make something up.
Okay, Councillor Bright.
Hello.
So I thought he was going to come back later. Sorry.
Two other points on the timing, whether we're being corralled. Could this existing contract be rolled over for a further year to give us a breathing space? And
I'll be faster with this one. So unfortunately not. We can't extend this contract any further. And if we did try to do that, that would, I believe, go against procurement regulations. So we can't extend it any further, and we do need to procure for this now in time for a new contract coming in 2025. And for the final question, no, I've lost it. Sorry. Alternatives for proper exam, looking at. So we did, with our consultant, we did carry out a series of workshops. I wasn't part of all of them, and they did explore the various models that we could adopt for this. This was seen as the best model for us to go for in the position that we're in now, because it did provide resilience for the service to be able to continue to provide the day-to-day repairs. Like you have pointed out that we don't have time and you might feel corralled into doing this. We wouldn't have time to set up a DLO in a year and a half. I feel personally that it would take at least 3 years for us to start from scratch to prepare for that kind of service to be brought in-house and to be able to do it properly. So I think that we've gone for the best option that we can here, and there is an intention throughout the course of this contract to explore what other elements of work we can bring in-house while the contract is going through. There are elements of it that are call-off, and we'll keep it that way purposefully so that we can stop if need be, and we are happy with the service that we can provide ourselves. We can then stop that coming through our main contractor and just provide that part for ourselves. So we can almost do that incrementally. It feels like a much safer option to go for in that way.
Thanks, Sally. I'm not comfortable, obviously, with it feeling that we have been corralled into this, but nobody, time is time. But if it is possible to develop in parallel in-house services whilst this contract is underway, if there's any way that we can do that under this contract, then that would be a good idea perhaps to consider, simply because it then gives us options and we're not beholden to one monopolistic supplier. Yeah, thanks.
It's okay if I come back on that, Chair. Yeah, we are, as evidence in the report, already looking to do that with minor works so that we can build capacity there, which will obviously help in other areas also, because minor works spans a huge number of our functions. That seems to me to be a very good starting point for us to look at how well that works and where we can expand it to in other areas. We discussed earlier adding this to the housing CAG timetabling so that we can explore what works and what we see happening in the long-term future and what looks promising on that front. So that's something that will be brought in fairly shortly. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dwight.
Almost forgot what I was going to ask him. Just the 12 questions for me. I would really I don't come from a property background, but deal with contracts and things. So I'm just curious to see what kind of crossover there is. Obviously, it's encouraging that we're aiming to have a long contract and a partnership. So it kind of ties into Councillor Packman's question. Around how the contract is structured. Is there an element of performance-related pay going on here, where maybe they have to, the contractor will have to deliver to certain pricing commitments, and either on year 1, year 2, they get X% of their fee either way, depending on how well they deliver?
Thank you. Thank you for the one question. That's not something that we have considered putting into this contract, but I will take that back to our consultant and see if it is worth considering. I think that we have steered away from this because with an element of performance-related pay, it can be quite hard to manage, and contractors can do clever things with their stats, so they make sure they get their performance-related pay. And in the same vein, we can often pay too much for what they're delivering over and above. But I think it's a really good discussion that we'll take back. Thank you.
And again, another question, are there any independent auditors in the market who would be able to give you a very clear, because that's how it works in my industry. So you have a set of pricing commitments, you either meet them or you don't, or if it looks woolly, then there are companies that pick up on that. And actually it does work both ways. So you get a situation where you might have been really busy on behalf of a client for a year, and all of a sudden you get a performance related bonus that means actually everyone's very happy at the end of the year. So it works quite well.
Hello, Councillor Davis. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Sally. I'm going to repeat a comment I made 24 hours ago at a briefing. There's a lot of work gone into this. I'm interested at how little any of us know about it. I've got some real concerns, and thank you for your input and your work. Those concerns relate to this type of initiative is only as good and effective as its monitoring and enforcement. Given this council's history on monitoring and enforcement, I've got some very real concerns. We can't get enforcement to turn up when it's necessary. We can't get answers from any form of enforcement. What happens when we've handed over 165 million potentially of contract? Why does it need to be longer? We currently have a 5-year award process which gives us an automatic break, and I don't trust the council's agreements with break clauses because we've got lumbered with Bretts and all that toxicity in Ramsgate. Yeah? I have some, these are very real concerns. We're putting all of our eggs in one basket. It's actually a reversal away from localism and plays into the hands of, corporate greed, basically. And there's a line in 8.1 that says we have explored other options. These are not recommended. 1, procure the contract using an open procurement campaign. This is not recommended as not the approach favoured by the market, meaning we may not be able to attract the contractors we would like to tender. Surely an open and transparent tender process will either attract or it won't. And if it doesn't attract the people we think it should, then maybe there's a message in that. Sorry, but I also would like to back up everything Councillor Manners has said. I think we need a LATCO here. I fail to see the same as I've said previously with the purchase of council housing, how putting a third-party interest profit ratio into an equation, how that makes it cheaper, I don't know. I'm very confused about why we're going outsource, because in fact in the Grant Thornton external report, which we were discussing only last week in this chamber, one of the key recommendations is less outsourcing, more do it ourselves. And this seems to be flying in the face of the recommendations as well as the endemic dangers that I've said. So sorry, I'm not trying to have a go at you personally, Sally, and I know you've been instructed no doubt to do this. It's been developed over, I presume, quite a long time as well, which is why I would like to make the comment. I think it's sort of quite a shock to all of us that it's at this stage. And I think there are basic... we should have had more member involvement and discussion on this. This is a massive decision, and I'm not convinced that all of the logic in it is actually valid and applicable. But thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I really appreciate them. I think that's the point of this forum, is for you to challenge what we're doing and make sure that we're doing the right thing for our residents and for the council. So I appreciate that. A couple of points that I'd like to come back on. You mentioned that a contract is only as good and effective as its monitoring and enforcement. And I totally agree. When we took the service back in-house, the responsive repairs service was an absolute mess, and that was because there was no contract management in place while it was under East Kent Housing tenure, and the incumbent contractor were allowed to just do what they want. Since we've taken it back in-house, we have turned that around. I have a lot of confidence in my department's ability to manage contracts and manage them well, and that's evidenced through the improvement of our KPIs over the course of the last 3 years, which include KPIs for our turnaround times in voids, our performance on responsive repairs, and with our customer satisfaction as well. I think I'm running away with myself here. So I think the long and the short of that is I have a lot of confidence with my team to be able to manage the contract that we have. We manage it very well at the moment, and I have no doubt that we will not continue to manage a new contract in exactly the same way. The other point that I'd like to come back on is where you mentioned the tender process. Now, you're correct. The report does say that we do not recommend doing an open tender. This doesn't mean that the tender that we are proposing, the strategy that we're going for is a two-stage restricted process. And what that means is we open out the option to tender to anybody that wants to tender for it, but with a pre-qualifying questionnaire. So we ask people to come in, and if they want to, they'll do a pre-qualifying questionnaire, and from that, we will choose the 5 best to then invite them to carry out a full tender. Now, the reason we do that is to try and attract as much interest in this contract as possible, because a lot of contractors that are not familiar with this area or feel that they wouldn't have an opportunity to win will be put off by the fact that they could be up against a lot of competition. For a contractor to do a tender like this would take them a lot of work and a lot of expense. And if they're put off, they won't do that. And that actually, doing an open tender where we just go up to everybody and invite everybody to do a full tender process might restrict the amount of people that we have actually making an application for this.
So effectively, that becomes a triage process. And yeah, no, thank you for answering that, because I think the criteria for that triage process are something that certainly this committee would want to have oversight and an input into, so that just in or even awareness of, because transparency is everything. And these major decisions like this, there are real concerns about the external provision. I mean, it's a few years ago now, but pre-MEARS, and I don't think Serco were in the mix, but pre-MEARS, an outfit called DBK were providing this service to the council, and of course you would expect capital adequacy to have been part of our due diligence process. They couldn't even clear checks for 10 grand. And it caused uproar and massive damage. And yet, this had been notified to the council. What I'm asking for is a robustness in the accountability, so that we don't keep, as Einstein said, behaving like lunatics, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. And the evidence, Brett's, DBK, the evidence has been there for a long time. And if we can overcome those challenges, I'd welcome it, because then it makes a simpler accountability. But that accountability has to be built into the equation. Thanks. Thank you.
Councillor Scobie. I think we take Councillor Scobie, then we move on to the
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of points to make. I do have to respond to the last speaker slightly, because it's always fun in politics, particularly in scrutiny and council and cabinet, to have a bit of political knockabout. But an element of it's a Labour council, so opposition members throw things. But I think we do have to be factual. And 2 comments that were made about the Grant Thornton report clearly recommending that there was no outsourcing, or the council should do more outsourcing, less outsourcing, is, slightly missing the point. That report was talking about progress over time and was recommending some gaps based on a period of 3 or 4 years in governance. It was not suggesting how the council should be running projects going forwards, and clearly any project would have to do due diligence and all sorts of checks. So suggesting that a report from an external auditor to a governance and audit committee addressing governance issues was instructing the council to do more outsourcing is stretching it to the limits. And there also does have to be an element that at meeting after meeting, certain members keep bringing up issues that have happened in the last 5 years continuously to tar hard-working officers and a council that is making improvements, maybe too slow for some, but is making improvements. We do just need to push back on that, because by criticising the council as is and officers as is, most of whom weren't even in post, so we have a whole new senior leadership team, is actually doing some negative damage, because we all need to be positive and try and take this council forward. But that wasn't the point I was going to make, Chair. One of the things I'm concerned about in the report is the lack of coverage on risk management. Under 3.5, it talks about risks and then very quickly moves on, just saying that the whole risk management section is almost, if we don't do this, the risk is that there won't be anything. And one of the council's biggest risks at the moment is cybersecurity. And it talks under 3.7 of the covering report that any supplier would be expected to digitally integrate. I'm slightly concerned that the report doesn't cover the risk potentially of cybersecurity. And looking at the industry, one of the most likely ways that a council like TDC would be impacted by a cybersecurity event would be via a third party that has access to its systems. So I'd just like to ask a question, and this may be something that could be followed up. What due diligence will be done around cybersecurity of third parties? And then linked to that, under the attached report, under 5.5.2, it talks about supplier insolvency as a risk as well. It goes on to mention that this would have serious council-wide consequences if a supplier went insolvent, but then suggests that a way of covering that would be a no-fault break clause, which of course would be good protection for the council to stop it getting any worse. But that wouldn't cover the actual impact of a supplier becoming insolvent. And so I do think some thinking has to go into what those consequences are, because that has the ability, if not properly done, to impact residents, to impact council services, impact our balance sheet significantly. And it's sort of only really covered by no fault. I have to be honest, I'm not an expert in housing or contracts or procurement or anything, so I'd certainly take the recommendation from officers who've done clearly a lot of work that going with a single provider may be the best way. But the report keeps talking about that we're putting all of our eggs in one basket, and then there doesn't seem to be any mitigation to that risk.
Thank you for your questions. I'm wondering if I can come back up to you on those questions at a later date. Feels like there's stuff I don't know here, and I would like to provide you with a full response. Thank you.
Okay, members, so let's look at the recommendation. So the recommendation we're asked to send to Cabinet is that the letting of a 10-year contract with provision to extend for a further 5-year period to enable a true alliance between contractors and client. This is the provision of responsive repairs, voids, compliance, cyclical and planned works. This contract will also include the element of works for corporate properties. So that's the recommendation. Do we want to make any changes or make any proposals to take forward in relation to that? Or are we all happy? Councillor Bright.
I would like to explore some degree of performance-related fee. To be quite honest, I think it needs to be, someone needs to be, if it's a 10-year contract, the contractor needs to be motivated throughout the tenure. Otherwise it's kind of, they've got it sewn up, haven't they, for 10 years.
Sure. Is there anything built into the contract that concerns performance relation, or is there anything that we set out with the contractor?
Performance will be within the contract. It will be set out our expectations on performance. What we don't have is the performance-related pay element here, which I'm going to take back and look into a little bit further.
Okay. I was going to ask, is there something...
I don't know if it's useful, so feel free to tell me if it's not, but thinking about the integration of this into the housing CAG timetabling, would it be useful for overview and scrutiny to, when we have reports prepared for the housing CAG, for you to be able to scrutinise what it is that we're looking at and discussing in relation to how the contract is going and how we can build on minor works and what might work and what might not in terms of bringing certain parts forward? Just an idea.
Yeah, I'm just being made aware the Cabinet advisory stuff doesn't come through scrutiny. So is there a part for the recommendation? Do you want to make a change or add something in, or do you want to give us the word in that you want to put in there to take forward to Cabinet?
I would add something like explore the ability to lock in some performance-related fee element or something. I don't know. Does that work?
Okay, we got that noted. Councillor Menace?
Yeah, I feel that this is a bit of a shotgun wedding. I'm disappointed to be here with this because it feels like we haven't really got much of an alternative. And I would hope that there's every other option is looked at to be able to. I mean, I think TDC had an opportunity here that's been wasted to actually prove it could manage its own affairs and save taxpayers' money. And we've just gone for the. I think we've just gone for the easy option. So we are where we are.
Okay, so with regard to the proposal put forward, are you seconding that? Is that what? No, you're not seconding. I've got Councillor Scobie seconding your proposal. Okay. Does anybody else want to make any more amendments?
Do we want to just go for a vote on that?
Do we have to take a vote?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we take a vote on the amendment that Councillor Bright's put forward.
Yeah.
Charles, could you just read out what amendment we put forward?
Councillor Bright proposed that he would like the council to explore performance-related monitoring of the contract.
Locking in a performance-related fee within the contract.
And locking in a performance-related
Fee.
Okay.
Yeah. Either a malus or a bonus. Yeah. I mean, if they're fantastic, then exactly.
Okay, so do you all agree with that? We all agree. Okay, so we'll add that into the recommendation. Okay, moving on. Item number... Is there anything else before we move on?
Chair, could I say something very briefly, if that's okay? I meant to come back to Councillor Davis earlier. To a certain degree, I echo your feelings on this. Obviously, I've been here since the end of May, effectively. And a standard lead time for something of this scale would be about 3 years, I think we worked out. So we can no longer renew this contract. We're at a point that we know we have to start procurement now because we do not have time to entirely in-source everything. But I disagree that this is in effect shutting down or only choosing one option. The inclusion of in-house minor works and the fact that we've got callback and we've got break clauses is an attempt to ensure that this is an adaptable contract, that we can keep looking at this, and as we build not only our officer numbers and our operative numbers and our skills in terms of managing this, that we can look to see if it is possible to work in other areas, and we can see how the contract is functioning as a whole. What's presented here today is in effect a way to open up what otherwise would be a very, very closed book. And like you, I would like to have more time, but in the time that we have, without risking service and without risking violating our requirements in terms of our statutory obligations to residents, I think ensuring that we are looking at all options and that we are keeping that open in terms of callback is really important, and that's what I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. You've actually just put into words, and Sally, in fact, with your response, and answered a very real concern, and it's the locking in. Yep. Too many times, and I'm sorry to bang the drum, but there is no, these are the facts, and some of us have been involved with this for a few years, whether in this chamber or outside of it. And the community and the community purse has been battered by inadequacies, let's call them that, in our arrangements. So that's why I'm very concerned about extending anything. But so long as the break clauses and the ability to change, plus nobody knows what the future holds. We're in volatile times, and I think in terms of everything, we just have to be able to, if we're riding a horse, we have to be able to sometimes pull over and swap it. So, yeah. But thank you. Thank you again for your answers and for taking robust questioning in the spirit it's intended. It's not political, it's about getting the truth and hopefully never going back to where we've been. Thank you.
Okay, members, so if there's no more comments, can we all please note the report? Okay, moving on to item number 4, the Tenant and Leaseholder Services Q2 report for 2023 to 24. Call on Ms O'Sullivan again.
Thank you. So I am pleased to introduce our new look KPIs for Q1 and Q2. We've developed a dashboard style way of reporting, and we hope this is more accessible than our previous reports. Our compliance reports will remain looking the same for now, as their requirements are prescribed within our policy. We've also introduced a new dashboard to show the progress of our tyre blocks retrofit and refurbishment project, because this is a massive project and I think there's a lot of interest in it. Most of our operational PIs are running in the way we would like them, and I would like to take the opportunity to run through a couple of highlights over the last quarter and also let you know what we're doing in areas of performance where we would like to improve. Firstly, in Q2 we achieved our voids target for the first time since coming back in-house, and this has been due to the hard work of our voids team and strong contract management by our senior repairs surveyor. We're also continuing to reduce our tenant arrears, which has now fallen to under 4%, sitting at 3.9, which is a massive achievement. When we took the service back in-house, arrears were around 7%. Where we need to do better is with our capital spend and capital works. We have struggled to procure contracts over the last 6 months, and finally at the end of Q2 we were in a position to award a few contracts, and this means over the next 6 months we hope to catch up on much of the capital programme that we've fallen behind on. For our compliance to statistics, sorry, I'm tripping over my teeth now, we are again operating steadily for most of our work streams. I would like to highlight the progress made on electrical safety programme, which has increased to 97.67 and continues to increase to a level where soon I will feel comfortable to move this to as a business as usual work stream. I also need to point out we have one property that does not have a valid gas safety certificate, and this is because the resident is a hoarder, and we've been unable to complete all the tests required to obtain a valid certificate. We have done everything we can to provide evidence for this, and should we be approached by the regulator for social housing, we can prove to them we have done everything possible to ensure the safety of this resident and the local community. We are also unfortunately having to apply for an injunction to clear this property to allow works to be completed. That's all I wanted to say on this report, but would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members, there are several reports. I'm sure you've all read them. No comments at all, Councillor Davis?
Just one comment to say positively. And all the indices for what you've done since you've, and I'm going to use your phrase, in-house. You brought the services, the council brought the services you're responsible back in-house. We're thriving compared to where we were. Can you see where my argument is about outsourcing? If we can do it so well there, why not replicate that process? You know, let's make like McDonald's, and if you're doing it good, do it again and again and again, and suddenly, yeah. Thank you, though.
Councillor Manners?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what John said there, that it's all moving. That looks like it's all moving in the right direction, and to get the rent arrears down below 4% is actually quite a good thing. You know, that's a good place to be. One question on that though: do we have a properly robust eviction procedure for tenants that won't pay and refuse to move?
Yes, is the answer. The simple response is yes.
Is that outsourced or?
No, it's not outsourced. No. We do that ourselves. We have published a policy which is for income to, I can't think of the right words now, sorry, for recovery of income, and that includes our policy position on evictions as well. The team have robust procedures in place, and the ethos that they take is one of support. So we will do everything within our power to engage with residents that are in rent arrears and provide them with the tools to be able to manage their finances, to pay their rent and sustain their tenancy, and that's our first port of call. Where we do apply for eviction is traditionally where our residents will not engage with us. But we try every way to engage. We will send letters, we'll make phone calls, we'll send texts, we'll go and visit them before we move to that part of the process, which we do obviously unfortunately have to carry out from time to time.
Councillor Whitehead, you indicated?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I think I stand to speak on this one. It's really just a summing up and a thank you. These reports are always very, very thorough. A huge amount of work goes into collecting and analysing data within housing, and the comprehensive nature of this work is something that I believe officers involved deserve significant credit for. For me, I would like to especially praise the new dashboard style reporting. I think that makes information far more accessible and very clear to understand. And I also welcome the inclusion of in-depth reporting on our tower block retrofit and refurbishment programme. This is an absolutely massive piece of work. It's already included an inclusive and comprehensive resident consultation. And I think including this as a separate work stream is exceptionally positive, as I think it's of interest to both residents and members. I'm heartened that gas compliance only has one outstanding case and that it's linked solely to very, very complex access issues, as I think this indicates the level of effort we have made and are making to ensure that we are protecting residents. And on a similar note, the drop in tenant arrears is extremely positive considering the level of financial stress that many residents are currently facing. I think this says a huge amount about the support that our team are giving to residents to help them access the support that they may be entitled to and to support them when times are this challenging. Our work in relation to voids is also very pleasing. Faster turnaround times mean more families accommodated more quickly, which is essential to reduce disruption to families and provide secure accommodation as quickly as possible. Ms O'Sullivan's reports are always very thorough, and this is absolutely no exception. I want to recognise all of the work that goes into collating and presenting this, and I extend my thanks to you and to all involved. Thank you.
Councillor Patman.
Yeah, I think I ask you this every time it comes up about, we've got 2 commercial units under lease, which is Newington and Brunswick. What about Millmead Hall? It sits right in my ward and it does sit there quite empty quite a lot of the time. Is there any plans to lease this out to a community organisation or a use of a TDC building? Thank you.
We've kept Millmead in-house and have chosen not to put this on a commercial lease. I don't really know why, but we do take bookings for it. So it's quite full at the weekends at the moment. I think we've got a couple of church groups that go in. We have in the past had mother and baby groups that have used it during the week as well. So there is an opportunity for people to hire out the hall at various times. I think at the moment it's being used by Rise for the overnight accommodation.
Yeah, I just think that there could be better use for the hall. It does. I know that there are bookings, and I go past every Sunday morning, and there's a church group in there, and Rise are in there at the moment. But it does sit there empty, and I get a lot of emails from residents asking what we're doing with it, and I think it could be better used with maybe the school next door or something like that. So I don't know. Could you have a look into what we could do with it? I don't know. Absolutely. Thank you.
Good comment. Thank you.
Councillor Faruqi.
Thank you very much for this very thorough and well-written report. Really appreciate it. Because you mentioned the resident who is a hoarder and who have difficulty with the gas certificate and so forth, has there been the safeguarding team involved to confirm that that resident is actually also in a place of safety? So, for example, if they had a fall, that an ambulance crew would be able to actually get in and, you know, do what needed to be done and so forth?
Yes, this is a very, very complex case that we have known about for a number of years. This is the first time we haven't been able to complete a gas safety certificate in the property, but we do have multi-agency involvement with it and have done for a while. This resident, unfortunately, does not engage with us, which is why we've had to move to a position of legal enforcement to be able to ensure that the property is safe for them to reside in now.
Okay, members, if there's no more comments, do we have any recommendations we want to take forward to Cabinet with this report? No? Okay, if not, then can we all note the report, please? Thank you. And thanks, Sally, for a pretty tough hour. Okay, moving on to item number 5, the Jackie Baker's Recreation Ground. I call on Mr Humber to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out proposals for Cabinet's approval for improvements at Jackie Baker's Recreation Ground. The report refers to a petition that was received by Council in June about the management of Jackie Baker's and describes the actions taken since then. The report also proposes the adoption of a master plan, which can be found at Annex 1 of the report, for the future development of the site. The master plan proposals are not currently funded, but the adoption of the plan will inform the direction and represent a first step towards securing the required funding for the long-term future of Jackie Baker's. The report further proposes that authority be delegated to investigate the options for future development on the site based on the master plan, including car parking, a new pavilion, and other sporting and recreational facilities that might enhance the offer at the site. A further report will be presented to Overview and Scrutiny Panel and to Cabinet once these options have been further explored. The recommendation includes the demolition of the existing pavilion, subject to planning prior approval being granted next week at the Meeting and Planning Committee. Following demolition, it is proposed that temporary facilities are provided with team changing rooms, showers, officials changing, storage and toilets. Thank you.
Okay, I call on Councillor Joanne Bright, please.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the much needed investment in the Jackie Baker's Recreation Ground, but I wonder if officers and future park designers will specifically be considering the needs of girls and young women in these new plans. Women and girls are much less likely to use sports fields than men and boys, and they frequently don't feel comfortable visiting these spaces as they have not been designed with their needs in mind. Recent research from Leeds University and the charity Make Space for Girls identified issues such as a lack of social seating, well-lit paths, a lack of toilets, and a focus on facilities favoured by boys as reasons why girls were less likely to use parks than boys. The research showed teenagers using multi-use games areas, such as football fields and basketball courts, were 92% boys and young men. Facilities such as tennis courts, play spaces and outdoor gyms were more likely to be used by girls, but still only 34%. The draft master plan for Jackie Baker's imagines a facility used by the whole community, but in reality these type of facilities do not properly cater for 50% of the population. Teenage girls are less likely to exercise outside than teenage boys, and this isn't going to change unless we apply gender mainstreaming in the planning and design of parks and recreational spaces. The proposed investment in this large recreation site seems like the perfect opportunity for Thanet District Council to lead by example and prove that teenage girls have as much right to outdoor fun as teenage boys. Other countries and other local councils have successfully designed parks to be more inclusive. Would it be possible to make a point of ensuring the facilities at Jackie Baker's appeal to girls and boys more equally? Perhaps we could consult with local schools and youth organisations to find out the needs and requirements of local girls to ensure these facilities are designed to be as gender inclusive as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have to absolutely agree, and I think it's fundamental to the design work for those spaces that we are thinking about inclusivity, thinking about designing out risk and making sure that these are safe, open spaces for everyone in the community to use. So you completely agree, and I think that's part of the process that we need to go through.
Okay, members, Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome the focus on Jackie Baker's and, you know, the cross-party political support there was when the petition came to Council. We all know Thanet District Council does not have enough budget to look after all of its assets, so when we do actually have a plan come before us to invest in an asset that has been underfunded and left to its current state, this is a cause for celebration and something that we should be positive about, so I really do welcome that. And I think thanks has to go to the residents who have campaigned for this and brought that petition, as well as to officers and to, personally for me, to Councillors Alban, Whitehead and Councillor Everett for their work and support on this, because Thanet District Council takes a long time to turn around on some of these things, and it's great that some of this was already in the pipeline, but a lot of support's been given. And to Tony in particular, I think it was probably your first week in work where you were getting lots of emails and calls to try and get temporary toilets down there and temporary facilities, just to appreciate your patience with us. I've got 2 points to make, Chair. The first one is around the plans themselves. I think there's diagrams and maps on page 17 under section 2 of the report, which I think are misrepresenting, don't even tally with each other, and I think are causing confusion to residents. You will look at, if you look at the two of them, I know there is a proviso within that on page 17 saying that these are just examples and will change, but the fact they exist means they get shared. It becomes something that's used on the media as a key point. I think if Cabinet adopts those, I think it would just continue that confusion. So my view and a recommendation I will make later on after the debate would be that we do not include those because of the confusion caused. I also think the report is from several months ago and has a whole section about housing, which again I'm not sure, even though it may have been part of the original report given to the council, whether that should be adopted, because it almost suggests that part of the master plan is reliant on the housing, which it isn't. It also suggests that there's a decision to be made by Cabinet about the housing, which there isn't. It was included in the local plan. A decision's already been made about that, and that will be coming forward, as I understand it, in the future. So I do not think that inclusion of that discussion of housing is relevant, because let's be really, really clear of it. With regards to Jackie Baker's, there is no politician I'm aware of in Thanet that is suggesting anything other than keeping that space for the people of Ramsgate. And I think including in a report about the potential development of this for opportunities for the community and sporting clubs and dog walkers, a section around housing, is especially if it goes out under recommendations C and D for public engagement, I just think that's sending the wrong message. So I think a recommendation I will make in a bit, Chair, is that actually the entire section 2 of that report is probably superfluous and doesn't need to be there. The real details in section 1, because in the second part of the report, it is only on page 17, 2.1, discussion of the recommendations, which is effectively the 2 diagrams, maps, and the rest of it is about housing. I think that whole section, I think Cabinet shouldn't adopt and just look at the first section. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I think, yeah, on the first point, as you've already pointed out, the plans are illustrative. They're sort of options. They're not intended to be, we're going to do one or the other of those. By its nature, the master plan's very high level, and there will be a great deal of work that goes into detailed design with consultation. But I do take your point. But that's the purpose of those being in there. On the housing, as I'm sure everyone's aware, the land was transferred from the general fund to the HRA, and that land's referred to in this. That site, there will be, certainly there's no intention that approving this master plan approves any of the housing there. That's subject to planning and subject to, I think the report refers to it coming back to Cabinet as well, the housing. So, yeah, it's not intended that this provides some sort of authorisation, some sort of permission for that. But, yeah, again, take your point.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for this report. I'd like to echo a couple of things that Councillor Scobie said. First of all, that it's really encouraging to be in a position to be able to respond to a resident's petition in the prompt and positive way that we have. And obviously this has been in train for a while, but the timing has worked out perfectly. And if we can present ourselves as the kind of council that responds to residents in that kind of way, I think this is a really, you know, it's a bit of a line in the sand really, and very encouraging, and thank you very much. And I'd also like to echo what Councillor Bright said about provision for girls, and it's been a concern certainly with other recreation areas, so something that definitely needs to be borne in mind. On the housing, again, as Councillor Scobie said, I think it is a distraction, and there has been a great deal of discussion on social media around which bits of the land were covenanted to the people of Ramsgate, etc., etc. I actually wrote to Mr. Verrill to ask if he had a copy of a diagram that showed us where the covenanted land was, so that we could put all those rumours to rest. And he says he doesn't, and sent me the which bit was allocated in the local plan. If we can actually find that document, which must be somewhere in the archives, and get it out there on social media, it would be tremendously helpful to stop the sort of muttering that's going on about their building housing on our land, etc., which is not helpful and is running contrary to that responsiveness about the petition thing going on. And finally, as a ward councillor in whose ward includes a recreation area which has what is laughingly referred to as a skate park, where the tumbleweed blows, I'd really like to see us try to improve the facilities we have already before we start on trying to build. Not that I don't want to see great facilities at Jackie Baker's, but we have something that refers to itself as a skate park that we know perfectly well isn't at the moment, that we're trying to raise funds for. And we'd really like to see things moving on that, perhaps in parallel with some bids going in for new facilities here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think on your first point, it sounds like, yeah, there needs to be a document search there. I can't comment here, but I'm sure we can have a look and bring it back. And yes, skate park, and I know we've had conversations about the skate park, and yes, agree, I think it's, yeah, okay.
Councillor Manus. Thank you, Phil. This is all good stuff. I mean, it's sort of what we all signed up for, I think, the idea that we could start to see world-class facilities for local kids and people that want to get out there and get involved in sport. It's impossible not to think what a great initiative. So I'm really happy that this is on the agenda here. I'd remind the council or the board that there's also a large group of people jealously peering over the garden fence in Cliftonville East who signed a very similar petition for a very similar project in North Down Park. And I hope that will come before this committee in the very near future as well. I am mindful, though, that you can only spend £1 once, and are we spreading ourselves? Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul slightly? This looks like a brilliant gold-plated scheme. I understand that Mike saying that it's not yet funded, but it will take an awful lot of funding to get there, obviously. And can we actually afford it? And are there savings that can be made in actually achieving a massive improvement at Jackie Baker's whilst still leaving budget for the other projects? And I note what Councillor Austin has said with skate parks. I mean, we've all got those facilities within our constituencies, our wards, where we would like to see this kind of investment. With that in mind, I was curious what the budget was for the temporary sports structure, what the longevity was for that structure, versus the cost of removing the asbestos from the existing roof and perhaps replacing the existing roof if it needed to be replaced, and a quick tosh up inside. How those numbers kind of balanced out, and given the timescale we're looking at, that would be one thing I'd look at. But also to keep our eyes on the ball so that we're able to deliver on North Down Park and the pavilion there as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Manners. So one of the key things with Jackie Baker's, the petition was from the Sunday Football League secretary. The Kent FA, through their Football Facilities Fund, have identified Jackie Baker's as a potential area for funding. So it gives it a unique situation where if we invest, we can then get the same amount of funding potentially from the FA. We need the master plan document in order to be able to start that process of discussion with Kent FA. So it's really quite crucial that we have some form of plan in place that they can then start to see that they can look at for their own funding scenarios. We also need to be in a position where we can move quickly, because notoriously Sport England funding, which it would be Sport England funding through the FA and the Football Foundation funding, is always with really tight timescales for actual being in the ground and delivered. So we need to have all of those things in place. I think it's really evident that there are projects that could go on in a number of parks and play areas throughout the district, and we are working on those as well, and as we've already discussed with Councillor Austin. So I'll take away the North Down Park scenario and work on that as well. But there is one of me, so I'm going as quick as I can. Your second point about the pavilion. So you're right to identify there is a quite substantial amount of asbestos in that pavilion, which is the reason why the demolition costs are as high as they are. The other scenarios within the pavilion are that the M&E is actually outdated and not efficient and not working well. So it's going to be a situation where we'd have to replace the roof, as you quite rightly identified, but we'd also have to strip out all M&E from the site to make it more efficient, to be in line with our, climate pledge. So we believe that with all of the things that we've seen in terms of the pavilions, the things that need to be addressed with the pavilion, on that basis, it would make more sense to demolish the pavilion and replace with a temporary changing facility. The intention is that the temporary changing facility will be a container type facility, but it's as a porter cabin scenario. We hope that will give it longevity rather than it being a porter cabin that's the normal classroom type facility that could be damaged quite easily.
Thank you, Tony. Just one quick thing on that. Has an asbestos survey taken place yet? And also, have we had a survey on the building to know, as an asbestos survey, and the demolition costs seem extraordinarily high, by a factor of about 400% actually. And I just wondered, had we had a number of competitive quotes for the demolition?
So where we are at the moment is that we have had a report on the pavilion in terms of what is wrong with it, and we are now in the process of getting approval to take forward a QS report to get the final demolition costs on the asbestos and the entire pavilion. That QS report has not been done yet. The work that's been done so far is from our internal surveyors within the council. The internal surveyors have talked about that figure being worst case scenario. They didn't want to kind of go too low on the figure. I am in agreement with you that potentially there could be a lower figure to the pavilion demolition, and I'm quite keen that the QS report happens once we get approval to do the demolition, so that we can then start to look at the cost. Once the QS report has been done, we will then go out to tender on an open tender basis to make sure that we get best value for money in terms of the demolition of the site.
Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak a second time, especially as I'm gate crashing your committee. I just wanted to make a couple of points that at the moment, as I understand it, there isn't actually funding committed to this beyond drawing down from the risk management reserve to cover the changing rooms. There is obviously potential borrowing funds from that housing land being moved and Section 106 contributions, but I think as the officer said, this is not a case of suddenly finding money to fund this, or we're at a very early stage of it. And there does need to be, I completely hear colleagues talking about parks and open spaces in their wards. I mean, we've got another one in Northwood that needs some care and attention. I think Jackie Baker's does have to be looked at differently. It actually has its own separate policy within the local plan, GI 07, which specifically states that Jackie Baker's will be protected as a place for sports and recreation. So this is not a space like any other within Thanet. It's been specifically set out by councillors for investment for things like this. So there is actually a special case for investment there. And again, trouble with saying these words because I think residents take it the wrong way, but the council is always looking for new revenue streams, and there is the opportunity that if there are sports facilities put up there of the magnitude we're looking at, that has the potential to be a very useful revenue stream for the council, which can be reinvested into grassroots sports and potentially into improving services in other ways, which does not exist in other open spaces in Thanet or has not been protected in the same way. So I appreciate you letting me speak a second time, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bright?
I'd just like to echo what Councillor Mann has said about this is actually really exciting. When reports coming our way for something so positive is good. I'd also unsurprisingly echo what Councillor Bright said, and I really do think we need to have a vision around carrying out due diligence around delivering solutions that girls and young women do want and will use. I think, you know, that point about multi-sport, it still doesn't really cut the mustard. So looking elsewhere at really good examples, looking far afield, I know there are really good examples, strangely, in Romania that really work well. And I'd just like to come on back to one point. Obviously, this isn't my ward, and there are a lot of things that I would love to see done in my ward. But Northwood is one of the, I believe, one of the more deprived wards in the district. And I think we have to weigh up cost and benefit, and the benefits to the mental health and the positive outcomes that a project like this delivers across what is a large ward with a large school. They impact on a lot of different areas of what goes on in Thanet. So you're looking at better mental health outcomes, better education outcomes, better health outcomes. So I think it's something, sometimes we just really need to deliver on a project in a big way, and I really support this this project. That wasn't a question.
And so thank you, and comments noted, and I agree. Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Again, really welcome this. Jackie Baker's is, as has been said, it's a hub, it's a sports hub, it's a health hub, it's a facility, and I think it transcends. We hear a lot about wards. We're all equally responsible, although we're elected by ward, and this facility affects every ward, probably in Ramsgate and a lot of Broadstairs as well, because it has a huge draw. Quite correctly, I think Mike's identified there's revenue available, because it's a few years ago now, but in the 80s there was a regular international hockey tournament there where the place was absolutely chock-a-block, and it brought in loads of money for TDC. So we're not reinventing the wheel. All we're actually doing is sort of waking up from years of having our head somewhere where we obviously weren't looking in the right direction. I'd also just like to, while I'm being non-political, back up my colleague Councillor Scobie. There was a lot of confusion, and it was to do with a very poorly headlined press piece when there was the planning application first went in for these houses. That set off the social media furore of, oh, they're building on it, and so on. So I think there is a bit of PR recovery to be done there, and probably not having housing in the master plan for sport would be a good start to that. But no, fabulous news and for all, and particularly my grandson is an avid user of Jackie Baker's, I understand, so therefore I'll declare that interest. However, one major point, but it's a minor point. Jackie Baker's, despite signage, this document and everything else, is spelt J-A-C-K-Y, and it's the name of a former operator of the land. before Dame Janet Stankham-Wills gifted it to the people of this community. So I think we've got a bit of editing to do because it's got an E shoved in it all over the show, but I can assure you it is, and if you look at the land registry and the actual official records, it's Jackie Baker's, Jacky. I hope we can get onto that and get the necessary edits done. Thank you.
Councillor Austin?
I just wanted to pick up on the comments about girls and young women. We have a youth council. Could we contact Councillor Keane, who I think is the cabinet member who links with the youth council, and maybe see if we can get some advice through that route about the kinds of things that might appeal to girls and young women as part of this facility?
Yes, is the answer, Councillor Austin. Yes, absolutely. Okay.
I think the Youth Council might be a topic for scrutiny at a later date. Yeah. Okay. Okay, members, any further comments you'd like to make before we look at the recommendations? No? Okay, I'll go through them because there's a number of recommendations. I'll go through them one at a time. Recommendations to Cabinet are that Cabinet approves the demolition of the existing pavilion on the basis of health and safety, subject to the local planning authority giving prior approval. Do we all agree with that one? Sorry, are you two okay though? Then? Okay, I'll read that out again. The recommendations to Cabinet are that Cabinet approves the demolition of the existing pavilion on the basis of health and safety, subject to the local planning authority giving prior approval. Do we all agree with that?
Just the caveat.
That Cabinet approves the purchase of a temporary porter-cabin style changing facility once the demolition has occurred. Do we all agree with that? Okay. Next one is that Cabinet approves the public engagement exercise to inform the master planning for Jackie Baker's based on the draft master plan attached to Annex 1. Councillor Scobie.
Can I propose an amendment to that, and that the sentence ends based on Section 1 of the draft master plan attached at Annex 1. Because I think if you go out to public consultation with maps that do not properly cover what's happening, plus housing which is not relevant to the master plan, in my opinion, I think that's not a good plan.
So you want something removed from...
I'm adding the words between based on the draft master plan, but based on the words...
So instead of attached to Annex 1, what did you just read out what you want to say?
Yeah, let me just work this out fully, sorry. So between the words on and the, based on Section 1 of the draft master plan.
Okay, got that.
And because we're not decision makers here, we're obviously recommending, if there are sections from Section 2, which I don't think there is, that officers think are relevant to potential funding bids from other people, but having looked at it, I don't think there is, but Cabinet have the ability to put those back in if needed, but I think the whole of Section 2 isn't relevant.
Okay, so second proposal, Councillor Austin, and all agree with that? Okay, good. Moving on to the next one. That Cabinet delegates authority to the Chief Executive Officer to investigate the options for future development on the site based on the master plan to include a new car park, new pavilion to include changing facilities and other sporting / recreational facilities that might enhance the offer at the site. A report on that will be represented to the Overview and Scrutiny Panel and Compliance, Cycle and... Oh, I've got the wrong... Sorry. So many pages. And the Cabinet wants these options have been further explored. Do we agree to that one? Yes. Okay. And also, last one, that Cabinet recommends the Council a one-off 23-24 supplementary general fund revenue budget of £370,000 be approved for the demolition of the existing pavilion and the provision of a temporary porter cabin facility to be funded from the risk reserve. Do we all agree to that? We all agree. Is there any other recommendation you'd like to put forward, Councillor Bright?
Can we just make a recommendation about young women and girls? So I think recommendation to ensure exploration of installation of facilities that will encourage the safe enjoyment of Jackie Bakers by girls and young women.
Have you got that written down?
Yeah, is that all right?
Yeah, if you give that to Charles, because you said it so fast, I don't think.
Oh,
you've got
okay.
it.
I'll say it slowly.
Yeah, say it slowly.
The recommendation to ensure exploration of installation, lots of Asians. Yeah, go on.
Explore that we will
Yeah.
will be installed.
Okay, to ensure, to explore that facilities will be installed that will encourage the safe enjoyment of Jackie Bakers by girls and young women. Is that okay?
Do I have a second on that? And do we all agree to that? Yes. We all agree. Okay, Councillor Manager, you wanted to put something forward?
Yeah, just on the temporary pavilion, that it be properly insured, given the vulnerability that we know that we've had with the temporary public toilets that have been burnt out by some, people in the night. That Jackie Bakers could be a little bit vulnerable there. That the siting of them be looked at very carefully, given that temporary structures are usually more vulnerable, and also look at insurance.
Yeah, sure. I would have thought insurance goes without saying, but I think Mr. Marmo had already said that it was going to be some sort of strengthened facilities. You want to come back?
Yeah, Chair. So the intention is to use the existing utilities and slab to site the temporary facility, and the existing insurance will cover that site. So yeah, it will be insured.
Councillor Scobie?
As local councillors and with the residents who did the petition, we have engaged with the local police as well, and there are residents who are following police advice to flag up any incident, because there have been a lot of incidents of antisocial behaviour, and we don't want what happened at the war wreck to be repeated at Jackie Bakers, where the council invests money and then things happen and then you just can't keep doing that. So absolutely, we're going to be working with residents to try and make sure it's safe.
Councillor Davis.
Ironically, although there's the PR issue with the housing, having that housing along that area and adjacent to it, I think will make all the difference in terms of occupation or security through occupation. It'll make it, because at the moment the gates are there and it's just an open field. Having activity and traffic there will, foot traffic.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no more recommendations, do we all note the report? Okay, moving on. Item number 6, the public toilets refurbishment and renewal project. I call on Mr. Humber again to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report proposes a schedule of investment in public toilets around the district. Budgets totalling £1.25 million with a mixture of revenue and capital funding have been identified. A further sum of £250,000 is anticipated, although not yet approved, via an external grant from Southern Water. The report proposes maintenance works at 7 sites. This will focus on addressing existing defects and is not a full refurbishment of the toilets, but it will return them to a much higher standard of repair. Examples of the work content can be found at Annex 1, along with the estimated cost. The total spend on revenue repair works is estimated at £279,000, and subject to approval at Cabinet, it is proposed to undertake these works in the new year so that they are complete before the start of the 2024 season. The report also proposes capital works at 3 sites, those being Margate Clock Tower, Stone Bay and Botany Bay. These capital works will provide significantly improved and accessible facilities at all 3 sites. There are currently 27 public toilets in Thanet, and this report proposes work at 10 of those 27 locations. This investment is proposed to be the start of an anticipated wider and longer term programme of public toilet improvements, subject to further funding being identified. The report also proposes that a further report be taken to Cabinet before the end of October 2024 to provide an update on toilet refurbishment and improvement works. The report will update on the capital works programme and will propose next steps to address refurbishment or improvements at public toilets not included in this initial phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Member. I call on a member of the public. I can't see her. Former member of the council, Miss Ruth Bailey.
Thank you and good evening. I hope my voice lasts. It's like Councillor Whitehead, I'm suffering a bit. As some will know, this is a subject that I've raised quite often in the past, so I wanted to come along this evening to welcome this long-awaited toilet strategy. This issue is of great importance to residents and visitors alike, and I speak from experience being in the front line listening to complaints when manning the visitor information kiosk in Broadstairs. We know that toilet provision is not a statutory duty, but clean, hygienic toilets, particularly in a seaside destination, are essential. Having this strategy in the public arena at last is a real positive step forward, so well done to all concerned. The report is clear and honest in its limitations. The detailed rationale, costings, schedule of works is welcome, as is the reassessment of disability and baby changing provision. It was pleasing to note that despite fears to the contrary, this refurbishment programme does not seem to entail the closure or selling off of any of the other toilet facilities, not yet anyway. I see from the report that the first tranche of toilets will be ready for next summer, which is great. However, the time span of the total programme given is 10 years at 3.4 of this report, which does seem a rather prolonged period. I do hope that funding can be found to speed this up, as I'm not sure some of the remaining toilets can wait that long. It would be good to know what the realistic timetable is for the proposed new builds at Margate, Botany and Stone Bay, as they are all in dire condition, as we know. Once the toilets are spruced up and more acceptable to our residents and visitors, has any thought been given to introducing a charging system to put money back into their future maintenance? Similarly, has any consideration been given to having commercial advertising on the outside of the toilets where appropriate, or even inside, in order to attract revenue? And finally, can we dare hope that once refurbished, the toilets will be open and operational at reasonable hours, especially during the long summer evenings when people are still out and about, instead of being closed fairly early in the late afternoon, early evening? I look forward to seeing the completed works. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ruth. Mr. Norman?
So just to confirm, in 3.4, the 10 years was actually the Jeff Oliver report saying that they estimated it would take 10 years worth of work to do all the works within the report. We think that that's not where we are, and we think we can do better than that, subject to funding.
Okay. Just to pick up the other points, I think absolutely charging and sort of commercial opportunities such as advertising need to be considered. There's quite a lot involved if we were to move to a model where we charge, and that's not proposed in this report. It's not proposed here, but it's something to consider in the future. But it's a different model from how we operate now, and requires a different level of attendance, particularly cleaning and attendance at the facilities. But it's I agree, it's something for consideration. And in terms of opening hours, I think we've talked around this before, and the need to do the very best we can with the resources that we've got available, and the budgets that we've got available to open, clean and lock up again toilets, which across 27 sites takes quite some time. The number of crews we have available means that there are some limitations with the opening hours, and we mustn't stay open too late because of antisocial behaviour that occurs around toilets and damage that can occur around toilets. But take the point, and it's always our objective to keep toilets open as long as possible, and the opening hours are based on priority and footfall as much as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Townend, you did indicate, I know you came in late.
Thank you for the report, Mike. Firstly, these 7 toilets that you're talking about, which you're going to initially repair to bring into use by the public and visitors, if you look where they're located, they're not really actually attacking the areas where we get a massive amount of visitors, such as Botany Bay, such as Central Margate. Now, these are 2 very major areas of visitors. And as far as the clock tower toilets go, I mean, they are totally unusable because they flood very easily. I mean, I've had people complain about them. And at Botany, we don't have a toilet. It's a piece of concrete, unusable. And then you talk about Southern Water sort of assisting with funding with regards to Portaloos. Now, we're also talking about Southern Water putting up £250,000 to repair toilets, and then we're talking about actually Southern Water is actually funding more Portaloos. So is that in addition to the £250,000, or is that £250,000 going to fund those Portaloos? It's going to cost, and the other thing is this, 2 Portaloos at Botany Bay are just not worth the trouble because of the volume of people that go down there. You need at least 4 toilets or more. So we're going to use, so what sort of money are we looking at? We're looking at a lot of money. I mean, as Tony has said, 10 years is just unacceptable for repairing the 27 toilets. But when we look at the volume, the amount of money we are going to require to actually repair these toilets over a period of time, how are we going to repay it? Where is it coming from? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Towning. So as you've highlighted, there are 7 toilets which will receive revenue repair works, so bringing them back to an acceptable standard but not undertaking improvement works as such. You mentioned Botany Bay and Margate, and those will be, along with Stone Bay, will be the focus of capital work. So at Margate, it's investment of £400,000 in improved and accessible toilets, so a much higher standard. And at Botany Bay, subject to that funding from Southern Water, it will be improvement to the existing facilities plus providing additional accessible facilities, which won't be Portaloo type toilets. That will be a more permanent arrangement, sort of event type toilets or secure toilets on the other side of the bay. That was all subject to planning and further approval. So those sites that you mentioned, the proposal is to invest in those more heavily with a greater amount of funding, so that they're improved and accessible facilities. I think that's probably covered the points in terms of. This report is quite clear that this is the start of a journey, a start of a strategy. The funding beyond this work for these 10 toilets is not identified yet, but that's work that needs to be done, and the commitment in the report is to come back in October next year to talk about the next phase of that, along with a funding strategy.
Can we just look at the small amount of money of 400,000? Okay, obviously that's a capital expenditure. So, however long we borrow it over, we're going to have to repay the interest on that. Where are we going to find the money to repay that interest? Because the toilets are free, and as you quite rightly point out, getting advertising and things like that is not ideal opportunity or proper thing to go about. And charging for toilets, there used to be a slogan about things like that years ago. But where is the money going to come? Not just to pay the 400, but to pay a couple of million was probably further down the road. where is the money going to come from to repay that capital sum and interest?
So in answer to your question for the money identified in this report, the 400 identified in this report, that is actually the borrowing will be repaid using an existing budget, which is still available. The toilets used to attract business rates. They don't anymore, and that budget is still available, and that budget will pay for the borrowing. So in this instance, there is a provision, and it's set out in the report as to how we cover the borrowing cost. Future funding needs to be, as I said, will need to be subject to a future report.
Councillor Cupp.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. Surprise, surprise, I want to talk on toilets. Wow. Don't laugh. As Ruth knows, this was my favourite subject at Council, as I was often questioned on it. I would just like to... What's wrong with sounding like Elvis? Yeah, I won't do my impression of Elvis. So, I just wanted to firstly congratulate this coming forward. I know how much work has gone into this, bearing in mind that the foundations of this were set out under the previous administration, and the amount of times that we had to look into things and then stop looking into certain areas because of feedback we received, coming up with ideas and being critical of those ideas. And the one thing I found that with the toilets, you are never ever going to win, no matter what you put on the paper. Firstly, I know it's not on the report, but I would just like to comment about the charging of the toilets. I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's there is concern around, if you look at a study undertaken by Southeastern Trains, who used to charge for their toilets, when they stopped charging for them, they saw a drastic decrease in the amount of people that used to do their business elsewhere other than the toilets. And also when people are walking around in their trunks and whatever else, they don't carry cash or card with them, and it just gives a reason for people to go and do things elsewhere. I am slightly concerned regarding the funding from Southern Water. I think it is a nice idea, absolutely, but I'm concerned that it's not cemented when this report is already coming to overview and scrutiny, and once again when it goes to Cabinet. And I think that really needs to be tightened up, very much so. A question that I wanted around this. Oh. What's going on? Shall I just have all of them on? I'll sit further away.
It's feedback. Turn it away like that. It's feedback.
Right.
Electric personality.
Oh God. So sorry. The question I was trying to get to is, Mike, as you know, there was plans around us putting provisions in place with works with Your Leisure. Now we were looking at a process to ensure that the toilets would stay open by giving the management of those toilets to Your Leisure. We were looking at Your Leisure taking on some of those toilets, so that they would be able to also open up more of their provisions, providing beach huts. And what I want to understand is are those conversations just completely stopped? Because I feel like as much as it's fantastic news, the investment right now, what is the future plan here? And are those conversations completely stopped with Your Leisure for that future-proofing and trying to help the concerns that residents came to us about opening them and cleaning them and things like that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cupp. So I think before those conversations, I mean, those conversations aren't going on at the moment, so to be clear, before any conversations such as that can happen, we need to have toilets that are at an acceptable standard that could potentially be transferred. So to be clear, no, those conversations aren't going on at the moment, and that they couldn't do until we have. I think we've improved the standard of the toilets.
Councillor Manners.
Thank you, Chair. I share George's pleasure at seeing finally some progress on toilets, particularly, although the Botany Bay toilet, strictly speaking, isn't in Cliftonville East. It probably, in the summer, it's about half of our problems are people looking for toilets around that part of the world. One issue with Southern Water, I attended a community engagement meeting in Ramsgate where Ash Ashby was on the panel together with the CEO of Southern Water, and it was announced at that meeting that funding had been secured for this same public toilet at Botany that we're now talking about. So I'm a little bit concerned. This seems to be an extraordinarily long courtship without any consummation so far. I speak on a fairly regular basis with the engagement team at Southern Water because of the other hat I wear with the Friends of Botany Bay. And I know that Southern Water, they're not the most perfect company in the world, as will be pointed out by many, I suppose, but they are very keen to make amends for the historic damage that they've caused. And I suspect are very keen also to put this one to bed and be seen to be doing so. So I would ask, are we having a productive engagement with Southern Water, and where are we up to in that relationship? I also think that we're talking about huge amounts of money being spent here on assets which they're not really assets, are they? They're overhead, if you think about it. We're going to spend hundreds of thousands, if not over $1 million, or what are we looking at, 650 if we include Stone Bay and Botany, on something that's just going to cost us more and more money. And I think there is scope to look at partnerships with the private sector to deliver on public toilets. If you're in the high street and you get caught short, you pop into Costa's to use the loo. You don't walk down to the harbour front in Ramsgate to use the public toilet there. You're going to Wetherspoons probably. At Botany Bay, the landlord I spoke to there gets through 12 industrial-sized loo rolls every single day whenever it goes above 25 degrees at the weekend. We do have a public toilet at Botany Bay. It's the Botany Bay Hotel. Now, if there is £250,000 of seed funding on the table, is it at Botany? Is it not possible to look at a partnership with a private operator who might be able to provide toilet provision in return for a softening of the terms of a long lease, whereby they might invest some of their own money as well? At Stone Bay, there is a very successful young entrepreneur who's got some sort of kiosk type concession there, and I understand that he has already approached TDC with regard to getting permission to put a more permanent structure on that site. Why not partner with people like that to provide the public toilet provision in return for, as I say, concessions on the rent on his lease? Give them a security of tenure, give them a long enough lease, and ask them to invest some of this money. And I suspect that if there's over £400,000 on the table to be invested, that could create something that would not only provide a destination venue in terms of food and beverage offering, but also probably some of the smartest public toilets that we would have in Broadstairs. So I just wonder if those conversations are taking place. As I say, it is important for our visitor economy that we've got these public toilets sorted. And if the private sector can do it efficiently, let's look to them. Thank you.
So just to give you current position with Southern Water, we have had confirmation emails from them in terms of they wish to fund Botany Bay toilets. Where they are at the moment is they're just doing a QS report on how much they need for that, and then they will start to look at finally announcing what commitment they will make towards the funds that are there. So as far as we're aware at the moment, they are giving us emails that commit to looking at Botany Bay, but they don't know how much money, and they've sort of talked about it might be as much as 250, it might be more, it might be less, but that was the number that they wanted to put into the public domain. But as it stands at the moment, where they are is it's QS reports that need to happen, and that's what we're waiting for.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting points raised. I am aware of in other areas where that model is tried. I know from other authorities where they've had issues with trying to, particularly in existing businesses, trying to get existing businesses to allow toilets to be used publicly, and other authorities have done surveys around that to gauge interest and had sort of not a great response to that. But on the basis of a commercial agreement where a site is put forward, obviously that would be subject to competition. It would need to be at the sort of value that we're talking about. It's not a model that we're looking at here. We're looking at providing public toilets where we maintain the control of those, at least in the short term, to be able to open them and close them when we want that to happen, and clean them to the standards that we want, and all those things. I think it's something that isn't considered here, but happy to consider that and think about those options.
Thanks. I do think, though, if TDC is the actual freeholder of the property, and you've got a properly drawn up lease, that you do have the whip hand over dictating the terms, the opening times, the standards and so on, for which the public toilets could be maintained. The difference would be that you're delegating that responsibility to the licensee or the lessee. Their motivation to do so is obviously that they wouldn't want their customers using substandard toilets, the same as Costa and KFC don't. But also their entire business model would depend upon them doing so, because you would have the ultimate sanction over the lease. That was the point really with that. And obviously the idea that there are private entrepreneurs out there, one of whom I've spoken to this week in Stone Bay, who are willing to introduce their own capital, and if we can spend it's much a bit better if we can spend other people's money. Maybe that came out the wrong way, but you know what I mean.
Okay, I'll take Councillor Bright, Councillor Davis and Councillor Austin, and then I think we need to move on because there are a lot of recommendations to go through.
Thank you. I hugely welcome this. I didn't know until May just how important public toilets were. So a lot of conversations, particularly in the summer, and the fact that you're looking at the improvements to Broadstairs is really important. I think these will pay for itself. So yes, they are an overhead, but Broadstairs Folk Week alone generates literally millions of pounds for the local economy. So I think anything that gets people coming back again is a good thing. You already answered my first question, which was, are we asking for enough, given that Southern Water are so keen? But obviously you've gone away and you're having those conversations, which is great. The point I would raise is I completely agree with Councillor Cupp on charging, and I like the idea of ad revenue, but it would be negligible, frankly. One thing that I do want to know is with regard to the next stages of the toilets, so for example Victoria Gardens in Broadstairs, have full surveys been undertaken of the infrastructure behind them? So not just the toilet blocks themselves, but also the plumbing underneath, because some of those blocks are probably at least 100 years old now. So has that work been done, and is it available to look at?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So what's referred to in here is the Jeff Oliver and Associates survey is essentially a dilapidation survey. So it looks at it's largely visual. So it looks at the things that can be seen. So where manhole covers can be lifted, they'll be lifted and looked, but it won't include things like a CCTV survey of the drain pipe, of the foul sewer pipes underneath. So that's the level of survey undertaken to date. So no, for more detailed information and the sort of information you'd need for capital improvement works or for that sort of thing, then yes, that additional survey work will be required.
Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mike. Just wanted to clarify one thing. This Southern Water money, the 250k, it says here, Southern Water have discussed the possibility of committing. Now, our understanding from a couple of years ago was that this was set in stone, and I was at the same meeting in Ramsgate that this was discussed at. So, is this the same money that's now become a possibility, or are we trying to give credit twice for it? Where is it? If not, where's the money that they promised 2 years ago? Because that was an unequivocal promise from that stage. I think Councillor Whitehead was at the same meeting, weren't you? At the Royal Harbour, you were definitely there, as were quite a number of. Now, that was committed. So why are we now just talking about possibilities? That's question one. However, I'd also like to bring to the attention there's a particular set of toilets and need that isn't being addressed and never appears on these lists, and that's on the Western Undercliff. Because Southern Water managed to flood the cafe and toilets down there to the point where it was deemed to be not viable to reinstate. But it was, funnily enough, viable to sell for some massive amount at auction to somebody with various ideas, but the deal there was that the leaseholder operated the toilets. They were given a 21-year lease in exchange for that requirement as part of the facility. Unfortunately, losing the cafe, and let's assume that we've not been misadvised as to its viability as a building, means that those toilets still sit there unused and unattended. I think there's been a portaloo down there at one point. Yeah, I mean, this is a busy beach, very popular. I know it doesn't suit everyone's agenda, but they ain't going anywhere, and it's a 12-month beach as well with the wild swimmers. Given that the whole reason for the debacle and this festering derelict block at the bottom of the cliff was down to Southern Water's inability to provide a service, should we not, and could we not, please, add to them that there needs to be toilet provision there until, as I say, there's an issue in that the block's been sold, so is now in the hands of a private individual. Who knows where that will go? But the need for toilet provision, and it's just been lost in the process. So maybe Southern Water would like to stump up. I'm sure it is not going to cost them a vast sum in the scale of things to stick 4 portaloos down there. Thank you. And, or if not, maybe we could move the ones along that were put on the port for the gypsies. There's an idea for the travellers. Are they still there, or have they been removed now?
Different subject, John.
No, I'm saying there were toilet provision was made there. I think we purchased some, didn't we?
Yes, there are toilets for the travellers, yes.
Are they, given that the travellers have come to the end of their tenure, could those toilets not be relocated on that site so that they provide provision for the beach, maybe?
So those toilets are there for the travellers. I can't really comment on moving those toilets. There's no budget for moving those toilets and putting them permanently on Western Undercliff.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot, but it's just struck me that there is a solution here potentially at minimal cost, so perhaps we can readdress that another occasion after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Austin.
I was going to raise the same question that Councillor Davis raised about the Western Undercliff. Is it possible for us at least to put the Western Undercliff back onto the list as a place that needs public toilet provision, even if we don't have a solution to that at the moment? We put 2 portaloos there over the summer. and they were very well used and kept extraordinarily clean. There was no vandalism, there wasn't so much as, you know, a shred of loo rolled down the beach or anything. They were really, really well used and responsibly used by the extensive number of swimmers and families that use those beaches, and we really do need something, a more permanent solution of some kind. So if we can just please put that location back on the list for future consideration, that would be a great help. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Austin, and yeah, understand the point completely. It was tied up in the sale and the agreement, and that hasn't happened. I think we have a budget that we are working to in terms of operating our public toilets. But the report that I've referred to that will be coming back next year, I think, yeah, it's completely reasonable to refer to those toilets and need. Need generally, need across the district generally, yeah.
And the last one, Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just had a couple of, one quick comment and then a request from the person I'm subbing for, Councillor Green. There's a couple of comments, just people asking where the money comes for public toilets. And I just want to point out there's a lot of council services that are delivered at a loss. That's what council tax is for. So this is one of those. Toilets are a bit of an odd one because it's not statutory, so it's something we choose to do, although in a tourist hotspot I don't think you can call that anything other than absolutely essential. So that was just one comment, Chair. The point that Councillor Green asked me to raise, and I won't do a David Green impression, I say that for the bar afterwards, he has just asked, particularly with a view to Ramsgate, that the reports on toilets that are not going forward, could the committee have sight of those just to understand some of the limitations and some of the implications of that? Because if there's 27 that have been surveyed this year and only a certain amount of those are going forward, could the committee see, or could individual ward councillors see? So that's David Green's comment, not mine.
Did I not see a list in the report where there's some for future? Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a list there, isn't there?
Yeah, so just to be clear on what we're talking about, so there are two annexes. One annex talks about the toilets we are doing and the cost of those. The other annex talks about the revenue, the proposed for revenue repairs, proposed for capital repairs, and those that are proposed to happen in another phase. So that information is there, but are we talking about the condition survey? Right, okay. So I think, yes, I think there's no reason why we can't make that available, yeah.
Okay, members, recommendations that we need to look at to Cabinet are that Cabinet approves the schedule of works that this report suggests in paragraph 3.1 and 3.2, either option 1 or option 2, depending on the outcome of the discussions with Southern Water, which will be undertaken using £400,000 from funding of earmarked reserves.
Sorry, Chair, can you say that again?
Yeah, can that? Yeah, I will start again. Recommendations to Cabinet are that Cabinet approves the schedule of works this report suggests in paragraph 3.1/3.2, either option 1 or option 2, depending on the outcome of discussions with Southern Water, which will be undertaken using £400,000 of funding from earmarked reserves. Under option 1, £279,000 will be allocated for revenue repairs and £121,000 revenue contribution to capital. Under option 2, the whole £400,000 will be allocated to revenue repairs. £450,000 of capital funding via borrowing and £400,000 from the Margate Town Deal funding external grant. Quite long-winded. Do we all agree to that? Okay. The next recommendation is that Cabinet recommends that the Council that a one-off supplementary general fund revenue budget of £279,000 be approved for the repairs to existing facilities to be funded from an underspend identified at the end of 2022-23 and allocated to earmarked reserves for investment in toilet facilities. Do we all agree to that? Okay, moving on to the next one. That Cabinet endorses the proposed financing of the existing £749,000 budget for the public toilets refurbishment and renewal project within the 2023-24 capital programme to be a mix of £450,000 of borrowing, £121,000 contribution for earmarked reserves, and the financing of the remaining £179,000 to be identified at a later date, with the actual financing of the capital programme being determined by the S151 officer as per officer delegations. Do we all agree to that? Lots of nodding heads. Next one, that Cabinet recommends the Council that a supplementary general fund capital budget of £250,000 be approved for the refurbishment of existing Botany Bay toilets, subject to the outcome of discussions with Southern Water for funding to the value of £250,000. Do we all agree to that? Okay. That next one, that Cabinet approves the budget virement adjustment to be made if discussions with Southern Water are not successful, as per option 2, with the virement of £121,000 from the budget for the revenue contribution to capital be transferred to the revenue budget for repairs to existing facilities. Do we all agree to that? Yeah. Okay, next one. That Cabinet notes that £400,000 of approved capital budget is allocated to toilet facilities within the Margate Town Deal scheme in the 2023 to 24 capital programme. Do we all agree to that? And the last one, that Cabinet, that a further report taken to Cabinet before the end of October 22-24, I'll start that again. That a further report taken to Cabinet before the end of October 2024, which provides an update on toilet refurbishment and improvement works, including the outcome of the Southern Water financial contribution. The report shall also propose the next steps to address the refurbishment or improvements at the public toilets not included in this initial phase. Do we all agree to that? Okay. Do we want to make any further recommendations? Councillor Austin.
That we add the Western Undercliff toilets to the list, please, for future refurbishment or future attention, at least consideration.
Okay, excellent. Any further comments we want to make? Councillor Scobie?
Just to clarify to Councillor Austin, was that for future action or consideration? Because you said both at the end there.
I think it will need to be consideration because we've got an agreement with the private business. So I think there has to be consideration and then see what we can do from there.
Do you second that, Councillor Scobie?
I do not.
Councillor Garner seconds that.
Not because I disagree with it, because I don't know enough about it.
Okay.
So
I have to ask if you all agree, but you'll probably abstain from that then. If there's no more recommendations, then can we all please note the report? Okay, that concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank all the Cabinet members and officers, and I didn't introduce our new monitors officer, Ingrid, so welcome to her to the scrutiny, and members of her team as well, and thank you all members for coming along. The live stream will now end. Thank you.